Hello, Scorpio. This is a general reading for the month of April, and I am focusing on the theme primarily and then going from there. The theme for the month of April for you as a Scorpio is trust yourself. There's been undercurrent of distrust. I feel like there's a good deal of you who've known quite a bit, but getting validation, external validation for what you saw was coming, has been long, hard, and arduous, and in a lot of ways still hasn't been completely fulfilled. And so through that, there's a bit of dismissing of, oh, do I really know? Am I really as connected as I thought? Am I really as psychically skilled as I thought? There's a self-doubt that has been happening because there is knowing and an understanding that you have experienced over the course of the last couple months that hasn't been validated. In fact, recently it has been almost proven to be the opposite. And the truth of the matter is that bide your time. What it is that you think is actually is, it's just taking a heck of a lot longer to come to absolute fruition. So continue trusting yourself, continuing doing what you've been doing. There's been choices and decisions that you've already made up to this point that have actually kept you ahead of the game in a lot of ways. Don't dismiss that. Recognize the value that that offers and allow that to help you to realize that you actually are as skilled and connected as you had previously perceived. It's just you have been ahead of the race a lot further in this than you ever have been in your life as far as your connections, your psychic connections. So don't be dismayed, and just remember the few times when you did take action, or even the few times that you didn't, and now you wished have because those few minor things have already been validated. Just realize that you don't dismiss what you know. Recognize the few times, even recently, and then recognize a time frame. Realize that some of this has been, you just have been so far ahead. You've just been further ahead in this particular insight than you have ever been before. Ten of Cups. Reaching a fullness in your capacity of knowing. That's going to be revealed throughout this month. You're going to reach a point where you won't have to ask yourself to trust yourself anymore. You're going to be really, the validation is really going to come to par. Now, don't get too overwhelmed. Don't start forcing some of the knowing. I get a sense that with this message, I kind of have to do a little bit of a disclaimer in that. Don't get too overwhelmed and don't get too cocky either. Don't get to the point where you're like, start having your head full of thoughts, and then all of these things that you begin to think are potential, don't allow them to kind of take over and then get to the point where you start thinking doomsday things, and then out of that you start thinking, wow, obviously I am gifted, and these are all going to come to pass. Don't force perceived connection, and I know that's tricky, because now it's like I'm taking back what I said, and that's not the case. I'm just saying you need to trust what you know that you know. You've already gotten to the point where you have an understanding of the knowing that has already been validated with time. And in this case, you knew so far ahead of the time that it almost created a bit of stress and anxiety because it took so long to be validated, to the point of almost even forgetting that you had received these validations in time, in a long time period. But in receiving this particular reading, don't get to the point where you start kind of getting your head filled with concepts of potential outcomes, to the point of beginning to fear that these particular things are going to be true. You gotta get to the point where you recognize what is a psychic knowing and what is your mind just kind of getting taken over with human ego and thinking that because you thought it must be the psychic truth. So just know that you need to just kind of bide your time, take note of what you know. And if you're starting to get confused by what you know versus what ego is starting to feed you as a knowing, just pay attention to the way you feel when you receive those psychic hits, when you receive those psychic downloads. And the more you sort of pay attention, the more you can trust yourself, and the more that psychic capacity and that knowing capacity, whatever level that is, you will get a better understanding of what it is that you perceive is psychic is actually truly a psychic download versus what is just the ego kind of stepping in. And it can be, especially for those of you who haven't been doing this for a while. So some of you have been doing it for quite a while, and that's the stumbling block is the knowing was so far ahead of the game, you started to question your ability. And for others of you, this is also new, that it's a bit of a struggle to decipher between the two. And so that's creating its own conundrum. I truly do believe that there is a bit of an awakening that's happening out of all of the events, and has been building up to this for many, many years. There's so many different channels out there that are already kind of tapping into this, and have been for several years, regarding just people becoming more aware, people becoming more awakened, people becoming more psychic. And I do believe that we all have the potential to be connected. And I'm sure you've heard this time and time again. My idea on this is not any different than so many other people out there. So there are those of you who have been connected and have been using your ability, be it just for your personal or family life, or be it for professional reasons, that you've been so far ahead of the game in what you've been connected and receiving, that it took so long to come to fruition that you started to doubt your connection. And I'm just telling you to stop that. And then there are others of you who it's new. You're kind of experiencing an awakening and a connection, and you're a bit confused because there's so much chaos out there. So it's a bit of a struggle to sort of decipher when the ego comes into play, and when what you get and what you know is truly a message. And I'm telling you that if you find ways where you can decipher between the two, whether you have been doing this for years or you've been new at this, if you find ways to kind of hone in on how you feel and to sort of decipher the ones that you know, the ones you already know were true and came to pass, and the ones that you thought could potentially be a message, and then you found out later that it was not. Decipher how you feel, decipher the experience, decipher the connection in those moments. And between that, whether you've been doing this for a long time or whether you are new at it, you can sort of build on that and get to where you trust yourself again, or begin to trust yourself wherever you are in this particular journey. How do you do that? We have 5 of Swords. Focus your mind during the chaos. So the number 5 is at that sort of precipice, but it's also the midway point when you look at numerology. It's an odd number, which means it's kind of on the unstable side. It's on the shaky ground sort of spectrum of numerology. And Swords has to do with the mind. And if you look at this picture, and I'm going to go by the picture because that is like what's really hitting me right now, is he is kind of amongst his thoughts, and he's resting. The figure in this picture is resting. So he's resting among his thoughts. Take the time that you have, whatever free time you may be given at this point in time throughout the month of April, to really sit among your thoughts, decipher them, find clarity so you can get rid of the ones that don't apply, and learn to recognize them. Learn to recognize the ones that you need to discard, and recognize the ones that you need to gather and take out of this. All right, Scorpio, sorry if this felt like it was a bit of a struggle, but I was trying to figure out the right way to say this to get the message across without being confusing. It took me a little while. I appreciate those of you who stuck it out to the end of the video, and hopefully this allows you to gain some clarity, gain some introspective, and gives you some encouragement as you move through the month of April. Until next time, many blessings.